Well, as people are joining us, I will welcome you. This is Joy Scott. This is a presentation from the ARE of Southern California, our Conversations with series. And our guest tonight is Kevin Tedeschi, and I know we're all excited about that, to be learning more about our dreams and what they are telling us and what they can tell us when we pay attention to them. Before Kevin gets started, just had a couple of things to share with you. First of all, if you might be new to the ARE, the Association for Research and Enlightenment, this is the organization that studies and preserves and educates based on the readings of Edgar Cayce, one of America's most influential mystics and psychics. And the mission of this organization is all about creating opportunities to achieve personal change in body, mind, and spirit. To get more information about Edgar Cayce and the ARE, you can visit www.edgarcayce.org and also find out more information about the Search for God study groups that are meeting virtually and throughout the US based on this material. And we'll have some more information for you, some connections too, as we go on here. I'm your host, Joy Scott. I have been involved in the ARE since I was 11 years old, and currently I'm the Los Angeles coordinator for the organization, and also wrote recently a book, Magenta Nation, based on Cayce's precepts of how we can heal our society. So this series is put on by the Los Angeles and San Diego groups within the ARE. It is a series of dialogues with noted leaders on spirit and science, all about healing ourselves and our world. And we have been doing this now for about 8 months, and we have other programs coming up that we're going to share with you. We are very excited to have today's guest, Kevin Tedeschi, who is Executive Director and CEO of the ARE and Atlantic University. Kevin is a student, teacher, and spokesperson for the Cayce material for more than 40 years, spoken around the world and on hundreds of different programs in the media and in person. He is a prolific writer. I don't know how he's done it, but in addition to his career as a teacher and educator and as an administrator and manager and executive, he's written more than 25 books, including the best-selling Edgar Cayce on the Akashic Records, Edgar Cayce on Reincarnation and Family Karma, and the best dream book ever. Indeed, he wrote the book about dreams. So tonight, Kevin is joining us to give us those insights into how we can work with our dreams. We do have some sample dreams that folks have sent in that we're going to be talking about as well. So welcome, Kevin. I'm going to set things up so that you can now share your screen with us.
Thank you, Joy, for having me, and thank you to the group for coming. My plan today is to hopefully get you as excited about dreams as I am. I have had the wonderful opportunity to work with dreams for a number of decades, and years ago I found a tool that makes interpretation all the more easier, and so that's what I'm going to show you tonight, how to work with your dreams the way I do, so that they are much easier to interpret and understand. So, becoming a dream interpreter for yourself and others. That's what we're going to be talking about. And we'll save some time at the end for questions you might have or questions that Joy's going to ask me towards the end. I want to tell you how it got started for me. It actually got started in an Edgar Cayce study group. I was in Denver, Colorado, where I grew up, and I was in my study group. And my study group, I was the youngest person in the group. I was about 19, 20. Everyone else was in their 40s or 50s. And I always felt like I was catching up because they'd been involved with this kind of work much longer than I had. And one of the things this group did was really interesting, really unique. Every 6 months, they would ask a group question.
Hey, Kevin, I just have a quick question. Are you showing slides yet?
I'm showing one that says Dreams How It Began. Can you see it?
No, we're seeing you right now.
Well, why are we not? Let's try it again. Let me try it again. How about now?
Now is perfect. We got it.
Okay, so here we go. Now, how it all began. So thanks, Joy. So I was in my study group, and every 6 months they would do this exercise where they would basically write out a question, and we would all have the same question, and we would come back the next week and talk about what we had learned from our dreams. Well, I had never asked a dream question, so I wasn't even sure I could do it. But the dream question that the group decided on was, what do I need to work on spiritually? And we would all have that same question. And we would come in next week, and then we would share our dream. And then the idea was the group would help you interpret so you could understand maybe what you were being led about your own soul growth. So that first night I was really nervous because I thought, I got 14 people in my group. I'm going to come back next week. I'm going to be the only one without a dream. And that made me a little anxious. But I wrote out my question, what do I need to work on spiritually? And I went to sleep, and the next day I remembered nothing. And so that made me a little more heightened, anxious. And so the second night, I wrote out my question a couple times, and then I read it over and over and over again. And I tucked it up in a little square, and I tucked it into my undershorts to keep it next to me all night. This is the dream I had. I dreamed I was in Egypt. Wait, there it is. I dreamed I was in Egypt. I was at the Great Pyramid. And that's actually the Great Pyramid. And if you can see off to the right there, right where my cursor is, there's a big hole there. And at the time, that's what it looks like. At the time, I had never been to Egypt, but in the dream, I was in Egypt. Since then, I've actually been to Egypt 6 times. ARE does tours to Egypt often, and I've been lucky enough to go. But I had never been. I'm in Colorado. I had this dream, and in the dream, I'm with about 50 other people, and we're in Egypt. And I'm coming right out of this exit you see right here, out to the Giza Plateau. And just as I'm doing that, somebody in this tour group yells really loud, by the way, Jesus taught Kevin some dance steps, and Kevin wants to show them to you now. Well, I was kind of surprised because, number one, I didn't know anything about dancing. And number two, I didn't know anything about meeting Jesus, but all these people start gathering around to watch my performance. And I'm a team player, and I thought, well, I can probably come up with something. So all these people are gathering around, and I'm thinking, what am I going to do for a dance show? And excuse the language, but somebody I didn't really care for in ARE sat down in front of me. And as this person sat down, I thought to myself, what an ass. Sorry, but that's what I thought in my head. And as soon as I thought that, I looked out over the Giza Plateau, and there was Jesus standing there. And he thought back what I had just thought. And his next thought was, more than anything else, you need to work on your thoughts. Well, when I woke up that next day, I was blown away. I had written down, what do I need to work on spiritually? And from the big guy himself, I got work on your thoughts. And from that day on, I became very interested in dreams. And eventually I found out I had quite an ability to work with dreams. And eventually other people found out about it. In fact, for a number of years, there was a woman who was a consultant for Fortune 10 business company executives. And she would call me, and she would pay me $30 an hour to interpret dreams on the phone for her, for these executives. And eventually she kept saying, you need to write these down, you need to write these down. And that eventually became my first dream book. Since that time, I have spoken on 6 continents on dreams, everywhere except where that little penguin is down in Antarctica. I also wrote ARE's Dream Interpretation app, which you can go to edgarcayce.org/apps, and you can download. It has 1,000 dream symbols in it. And I've written books on dreams and symbols. And I'm going to share with you what I found to be so easy with working with dreams. First, on Edgar Cayce. Edgar Cayce really suggested that dreams come from 3 different levels. Dreams that relate to our physical body or physical issues, dreams that relate to psychological or emotional issues, and dreams that relate to spiritual or soul insights. He also said this is the level of where we get psychic dreams, or dreams about the past, present, and future. And I have some of each of these to share with you tonight. Here are 3 ways to work with dreams. You can summarize the theme, which I'm going to explain in a moment. You can analyze the emotion, and you can work with individual symbols. And having worked with dreams for 45 years, I can tell you that most people skip to the 3rd step right there, work with individual symbols. It works, but the challenge is it takes forever. If you have a dream and start looking up every symbol in that dream, it's going to take you a very long time to interpret. And lots of times people become disillusioned because it takes too long. My approach is the first one. to summarize the theme. Why? The theme describes what the dream is all about. If you can summarize a dream in 1 or 2 sentences, you can get to the heart of what the whole dream is about. And then that's the theme, those are the symbols you look up. So for example, someone is running from something. Someone's afraid of something. Someone is happy about something. That's the theme. If you can come up with the theme of the dream, you're halfway home. The next one, and it's the best approach, the next one is to analyze the emotion. I have come to find that whatever emotion is being reflected in the dream is a mirror of the same emotion in waking life. So in other words, if you're dreaming about something that's making you anxious, what in real life is making you anxious? If you're dreaming about something that makes you insecure, what in real life is making you insecure? If you're dreaming about something that makes you joyful, what in real life is making you joyful? And then work with symbols. Symbols are associated generally with whatever is happening in the dreamer's waking life. Casey would say that dreams contrast and correlate the events of the day. The other thing to keep in mind is most dreams are symbolic, not literal. Lots of people have called me worried, afraid. They dreamed someone was going to die. And very often the dream is symbolic. And I have a couple examples in just a moment to show you. So here's a sample dream. All the dreams I'm going to show you are real dreams. This is a physical issue. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you the dream, give you some background, and then show you how to interpret it. Background. This was a 40-something-year-old man complained of being mentally tired and having problems concentrating. Here was his dream. I dreamed that I was crazy and having problems thinking. Somehow I was able to look inside my head. With my skull open, I could see all kinds of gears and wheels spinning around in their proper place, except for one. One of the wheels had stopped running altogether because a particle of dirt or trash had gotten stuck in it. Now remember, the first thing I tell you is come up with a theme. So there's lots of ways to say a theme. One might be something is stuck or blocked, or something isn't moving, however you want to describe the theme. So you don't worry about the gears, you don't worry about the thing that's blocking it. It's just what's happening, what's the imagery? And the idea is something is stuck or blocked, or something isn't moving. So if this is a physical dream and something isn't moving, it suggests something's wrong with the person's eliminations. If it's a psychological dream, it could mean that someone's having a hard time turning loose of thoughts and control. And when I told that to the dreamer, he admitted he was having problems with his eliminations. That's what was making him feel tired and mentally lethargic. So it's that simple. You look at a dream, you come up with one sentence, what is the dream describing, and then sometimes you dialogue with the dreamer. Here's a dream I had at my college dorm in 1976. It was a big dorm and it was very drafty. And I remember one day I was in my dorm room just freezing and the phone rang and it was my grandmother who lived in Utah. And she asked me how I was doing and I must have said something about being freezing because about 4 days later, I got a UPS box with an electric blanket in it. That was my grandmother. Well, I was delighted to have an electric blanket and I used to plug that thing in and get into bed. And I never thought about it, but shortly thereafter, I woke up every morning feeling exhausted. I could hardly move. I was just so tired. And I kept wondering, why am I so tired? And then one night I had this dream. I saw myself standing in the bathroom in my grandmother's house looking in the mirror. I had my electric blanket draped over my shoulders and around my body. Suddenly, I opened up the blanket and stared in the mirror. I was horrified to see that my body was covered with hundreds of leeches. And when I woke up, I realized the dream is telling me that the electric blanket is draining my energy. And so what I did after that was I would plug in the blanket, heat up the bed, and then I would unplug the blanket. And I never had problems anymore with the energy. Something is draining energy or life. That's the theme. All from a dream. So again, you can get insights, guidance from our dreams. Here's one from the Edgar Cayce readings. This was a newlywed couple. They were married 3 months and they were having a series of arguments. You know, back then it wasn't very common for people to live together. In fact, it hardly ever happened. And so once you got together with someone, you realized what it was really like to be around them. So they were married for 3 months and they were having all these arguments. And this is the dream the husband had. I was riding on a train and saw my wife riding in the seat next to the window. She was trying to measure something with a croquet mallet right next to the window. And I yelled, "It can't be measured that way." So the possible theme is someone is doing something differently than the dreamer would do it. He's yelling at her. or someone is doing something wrong, at least from the dreamer's perspective. Edgar Cayce gave a reading on this and told them that the reason they were having problems in their marriage is because they were measuring the success of their marriage from two different ways. He was measuring success by how much distance they were traveling on this train. He was looking out at the scenery, seeing people they were going by, destinations they were having, whereas she was measuring the success of their marriage by how much fun they were having. That's the croquet mallet against the window. And that's why they really needed to come up with, what do we have in common? In fact, on many occasions when people would get together with Mr. Cayce and ask about getting married or their marriage, he would tell them that all successful relationships had to have a common theme. What is it we're in this together for? What is our unity of purpose that we can agree on? Remember, dreams contrast and correlate the events of the day. So what I do, just to show you, here are 3 real dreams. In fact, all of these are from ARE people at different places. And I'm going to show you how I do this. So dream 1. I dreamed that I was at Max's house where we have our spiritual discussion study group. When I walked in, I noticed there were about 6 or 7 coffins, the same number of people who are usually at the group. Max was staying as a spirit at the edge of the coffins, and I knew he was dead too. Now, the reason this woman told me this dream was she wondered whether or not she was supposed to tell her study group that she dreamed they had all died. She wondered if there was going to be some kind of a horrific accident or there was something wrong, but she was convinced that somehow all these people had died. Well, the theme is something has died or ended. Something has died or ended. Now, what is more logical? The fact that all these 7 people have died, or that something associated with this study group has died or ended? And so I asked this person, I said, are you thinking of stopping going to the study group? And that's exactly what had happened. The woman had thought she was going to drop out of this particular study group because it just wasn't convenient to her schedule. That's what the dream was about. It wasn't about all these people passing away. So remember, most often dreams are symbolic. The next one. I dreamed that I was walking along and noticed that the snake was biting my arm. I had to struggle to turn it loose of my arm. Later, as I was walking, I noticed that a snake, could have been the same one, was biting my ankle. Now, in terms of the theme, could be something like, something is impeding someone. Why do I say that? Because we got 2 different sections here. First of all, the snake is biting this person's arm. And then the snake, another snake made the same one, is biting this person's ankle. Now, believe it or not, for most women, when they dream of a snake, it represents a man or a male energy. Because it's in the shape of a phallus, so let's put it that way. So the dream is suggesting that some male energy is interfering with her free will. Why do I say that? Because your arm is a symbol of free will. When you go shopping, you use your arm to reach off and put anything you want in your cart. So your arm is an extension of your free will. In terms of your ankle is a symbol of your direction. So this snake is trying to impose upon her direction. So I asked this woman, I said, is there a male energy in your house, husband, boyfriend, father, who's trying to interfere with your free will or your direction? And in real life, she wanted to go back to college, but her husband kept getting mad at the idea and tried to bully her out of it. That's what the dream was about. So remember, dreams contrast and correlate the events of the day. They give us a symbolic look at what's going on in our life. I forgot to read it. Dream 3. I have had recurring dreams of losing my purse. On one occasion, I thought I had found it, but it was something useless like a paper bag full of pine cones. On another occasion, I looked desperately and couldn't find it anywhere. I can't do anything without my purse. I experience a heavy feeling of frustration when I have these dreams. So the theme is simply someone has lost something, and the woman tells us that the woman really has part of her identity caught up in her purse. She can't do anything without it. So it has something to do with something of value, something of identity. And talking to this woman, she had lost her job after 30 years and was trying to figure out what it was of value that she was supposed to be doing with her life next. So ultimately, each one of us is our own best dream interpreter because we all know what's going on in our life. But someone who knows how to work with dreams can help pull you out of it. The biggest mistake most of us make with helping someone with dreams, the biggest mistake, is we take our feelings about a symbol and we impose it on the dreamer. And one of the best examples I can think of is I told you about my grandmother, and my grandmother was the sweetest, most unconditionally loving person I ever knew. She's the one that sent me the electric blanket. So if someone has a dream about a grandmother, I need to not impose my feeling of a grandmother on the dreamer. And I was on the Art Bell show once, actually. It was the Art Bell show. And someone had called in with a dream about the grandmother. And I said, first thing I said was, describe your grandmother in one sentence. And the person said, my grandmother was the most critical human being I ever met. So my feeling about a grandmother is not being shared with this person. So if I try to interpret a dream about a grandmother my way, I'm going to be completely wrong. Now, why do dreams work? This is according to science. This is not Edgar Cayce. And the reason is because the conscious mind filters out most stimulus. What do I mean by that? If you're sitting in a chair, you do not feel the seat on the bottom of your fanny. You don't feel your glasses on your nose. You don't feel your shirt on your body. You don't hear the sound of your air conditioning system. If you're sitting next to someone, you probably don't hear the noise that they're making. You don't feel the temperature of the room. All this stimulus is coming toward you, and yet your conscious mind decides irrelevant and sets it in the subconscious. So everything around you, the sights, the sounds, everything is set aside, because otherwise we'd constantly be on sensory overload. If everything that came to us was made conscious, we'd be on sensory overload. But it's not lost. What happens is it goes from the conscious mind to the subconscious. And it's your subconscious that comes awake when we sleep. And everything that you've stored, all the things you've picked up on during the course of the day, just the little intuitive things or even the real things you've seen are just put into your subconscious, and they come alive when you sleep. And it's actually for this reason that if you are hypnotized after a crime scene, you remember more under hypnosis than you're aware of consciously, because all this data is set aside in the subconscious. Now, Edgar Cayce went a step further and suggested not only is there a conscious and a subconscious, but there is a superconscious. And Edgar Cayce suggested the superconscious is where we're all connected, and it's actually our connection to the Akashic records, that our superconscious mind is constantly plugged into the Akashic records. And what happens at this level is that the superconscious is constantly calculating probabilities, because the Akashic records are supposed to bring to us exactly what we need, exactly when we need it for our own soul growth and development. So the way that happens, it is, if Kevin does this, this is the outcome. If Kevin does that, that's the outcome. If Kevin does that, that's the outcome. And we dream about all these probabilities before they happen. Now, if you're sitting there thinking, well, that's never happened to me, it's happened to all of us. And this is how we experience it. We're driving somewhere and we think, wait a minute, I've already driven to this place, even though it's your first time. Or we're having a conversation with someone and we think, wait a minute, I've had this conversation before. And we have an experience we call deja vu. Most deja vu experiences are actually fragmentary dream recall. You dream something the night before it happened, and it's in your higher mind. And as it starts to unfold, you think, wait a minute, I've already had this experience. And we dream about things before they occur. Edgar Cayce said that nothing of significance ever happens to us without it first being foreshadowed in a dream. Let me give you a couple of examples. That's deja vu experiences. This is a real story. This is about the house my wife and I built in the Virginia Beach countryside back in 1995. And it was a very large lot. It was 3 1/3 acres. And I wanted to be in the center of the lot. So if you can see those little number signs, you can see on the left-hand side, the house is 121.63 feet from the next property line. And on the right-hand side, it's 121.15 feet to the next. I wanted this thing right in the center of that lot. And this is what it was supposed to look like. All drawn out. I had placed it there myself with my ruler and everything when the builder was talking to me. So this is before cell phones. This is way back 1995. Imagine there was a time when we didn't have cell phones. And so I was at work one day, and the builder told me the surveyors were out at the site today, and they put the post, I guess they put a corner post where they lay out the house. And he said they put the post down and they're going to pour down the concrete tomorrow for the foundation. I said, great. I said, I'll go look at it after the foundation's poured. That night I had a dream. And in the dream, my wife and I come to this house. It's already built. We go to the front door. It's a Victorian house we had built. And we walk into the front door. And as we're in the entryway, I start hearing kind of like a chewing sound, like somebody's chewing something. And I go to the back of the house and I look out the backyard. And there I see 2 horses eating off of our back porch. And in the dream, I knew these were the neighbor's horses. And through the window, I could see the horses had their heads over the neighbor's fence, and they were eating off my back porch. Well, according to this drawing, we're supposed to be about 120 feet back to the neighbor's yard. And I woke up and I thought, well, if the neighbor's horses are able to eat off my back porch, the house is too far back to the property line. So I drove out. It was a 40-minute drive. I drove out early the next morning to the property, and I realized when I got there, the surveyors had made a mistake. This is where they were supposed to put the post to lay out the house. Instead, they misread the map, and they put it where the well was supposed to be, a distance of about 75 feet. So I drove to the 7-Eleven because I had no cell phone, and I called the builder. I said, stop the concrete. The house is laid out wrong. And he did. All from a dream. I am not making this up. Casey said nothing of significance ever happens without it first being foreshadowed in a dream. Now, the best example we have on record, and I have been involved with ARE. I've been involved with ARE for 45 years, and I had been involved for decades before I came across this story, which I think is truly amazing. And I'm going to share it with you about precognitive dreaming. This is in our archives from 1977. Claire was an ARE member, and she lived in Australia. Now, 1977, this is before computers, but imagine before real personal computers. There was only one copy of the Edgar Cayce readings. Today, you can have the Edgar Cayce readings in your home. You can have them on your computer. If you're a member, you can go to the database and you can look anything up. But for Claire, there was only one copy, and it was in Virginia Beach, Virginia, and she was in Australia. And she was in a study group, and she was depressed to the depths of her soul because she was always sick. And one day, this is how she described her illness. She was always dizzy and always having fainting spells. She often had stomach, liver, and kidney problems. She had problems with digestion. She had gas pains. She was always exhausted. And one night, she was describing to a study group member at study group that she'd been to one doctor after another, and she'd never gotten help. And she said, sometimes I get so depressed, I just want to die. And her study group member said, well, why don't you ask for a dream? You know, why am I sick? How can I get well? So she did. And that night she had a dream. And in the dream, Edgar Cayce came to her with a piece of paper. And on the piece of paper was a number, 1880. And she woke up and she thought, well, maybe it's a reading number. Now there's 14,306 readings in Virginia Beach, Virginia. And Claire had a number, 1880. So the best thing she could think of was to write the library in Virginia Beach, Virginia. And she said, is there a reading number 1880? And if there is, could I have a copy of it? And a few weeks later, she got back an answer, and there was a reading numbered 1880. And Claire was blown away because the man who had asked for the reading, here was his symptoms in his questions. Why do I get dizzy spells? Why do I faint at times? Why do I have a lump in the pit of my stomach? What's the condition of my liver? Do I suffer from indigestion? Am I inflamed in my intestines? What causes gas pains? Do I have ulcers? Why do I tire so easily? So all his symptoms were exactly hers. And Edgar Cayce gave this man a reading and told him he had mercury poisoning. So Claire wondered if it was possible that she had had mercury poisoning. And a few weeks later, a study group member wrote Virginia Beach, Virginia, and told them this story. I am following up my last letter to you because of some rather exciting news Claire gave me this week. It appears that the reading she was told about in her dream, number 1880, contained an exact diagnosis of her ailments. In the reading, Cayce pinpointed the problem as having been caused by an intake of mercury. Claire asked her doctor for tests to ascertain if this was the case. She had written to her mother, who lived in the United States, and asked if she could ever recall having had trouble in this way. Her mother wrote back and told her that as a child, she had bitten off the end of a thermometer and swallowed the contents. Claire reported this to her doctor, who said it was most unlikely that she would have retained the element in her system for all this time, but nevertheless, tests were done and proved positive. So this is amazing on many levels. I mean, somehow out of 14,306 readings, Claire's superconscious mind, through the Akashic records, picks up on the one reading that can help her immensely, tuned into it somehow. Claire actually followed the treatment in the Edgar Cayce readings and actually cured herself of mercury poisoning. All of us have that capacity. So let me talk to you a minute about symbols. There's only 3 kinds of symbols. Archetypal symbols is one of them. An archetype is a symbol that has similar meaning across cultures. And mostly these archetypes encapsulate a pattern of human experience or emotion. So for example, birds are an archetype, and they're an archetype of a messenger. And everybody listening to this knows this, but they don't know that they know that. And how do you know that? Because a rooster announces the dawn of a new day, a dove announces the arrival of peace or love, a sparrow announces the arrival of spring, a vulture or a raven can announce death. We have birds and we think birds mean different things. Even in Noah and the flood, birds announce the end of the flood. So a bird is an archetypal messenger. And depending on the kind of bird, that's the kind of message. That's just one example. Water is also an archetype of spirit or emotion. Not because I said so, but because water is the source of all life on this planet, but ultimately spirit is the source of all life. So in a dream, water can be symbolic of spirit. Now, if you see a lot of waves or turbulence or things like that on the left, it symbolizes emotion. Why? Because the way we experience our life is through our emotion. Now, I want to say that archetypes mean the same thing to people across the world, but our personal symbols take precedence over archetypes. So if let's imagine when I was a 3-year-old little girl, I nearly drowned in my parents' swimming pool. From that day forward, when I dream about water, it does not have to do with spirit or emotion. It has to do with that experience, because my personal experiences take precedence over archetypes. Then we have also archetypal stories like the soul's journey. The soul's journey is an archetype for all of us. We were with God in the beginning. We went off on a journey of our own. At some point we think, you know what? I really just want to be back home with God. And we eventually end up where we left, but we're hopefully at a higher level of awareness. Each of these books is about the story of the soul's journey. The Hobbit, Pinocchio, The Wizard of Oz, Pilgrim's Progress is another one. The Parable of the Prodigal Son is another one. An archetype that encapsulates the story of the soul's journey. Now, nobody ever reads The Wizard of Oz and says, boy, that's the best archetype of the soul's journey I've ever read. But because it encapsulates a pattern of human experience that we all share, it can become a classic. So archetypes are stories that somehow encapsulate human experience. Falling in love would be an archetype. Experiencing personal sorrow could be an archetype. Anything that has an experience we have in common is an archetype. There's also cultural symbols, and these are symbols that have a similar meaning to a group or a culture, symbols that express some kind of common collective experience. So for example, in the United States, a dog can be symbolic of friendship. We even have a saying that a dog is man's best friend. In Egypt, a beetle is a symbol of good luck. Even at some of the sites, they sell stone beetles. They even have statues to beetles, because a beetle is symbolic of good luck. Now, a beetle is not a symbol of good luck in the United States. A beetle generally would be a symbol of something bugging or biting you. So again, we have cultural symbols that don't necessarily mean the same thing to another culture. Countries have symbols that are associated with them. So for example, the White House can be symbolic of USA. Somebody who doesn't like the USA could think of it as symbolic of aggression or power or chaos. In the United States, it could be a symbol of patriotism. In France, the symbol of France is the Eiffel Tower. Whatever you associate with France could be what it's symbolic of. It could be vacation, romance, food, and because it's in a cephalic symbol, it can also be symbolic of the male energy. Now here's one that has symbols in different places. In the United States, an elephant is symbolic of memory or lifespan. It's also, I have found, any type of a large animal with large skin, like an elephant or a whale, can be symbolic of someone who is holding in their emotions. They have all of this, let's say, weight inside of them that's being held in by skin. It can be about contained emotions. Now in India, an elephant is symbolic of the god Ganesh, which is the god of wisdom. He also removes obstacles. And then we have personal symbols, symbols that have the meaning to us as an individual, or symbols that express a personal experience. If you only can remember one symbol from tonight, let it be this one. A person, a friend, a family member, a public figure, whatever we most associate with that person, or what has most recently happened in that person's life, is usually what it represents. I cannot tell you how many times someone has called me to say, I dreamed about my friend, thinking the dream is for the friend. No. Generally, the question is, what has most recently happened in that friend's life? And then it means the same thing for you. Has your friend undergone a relationship change or a work change or a family problem or whatever it is? That friend symbolizes whatever you most associate with that person recently. Places, whatever we most associate with that place is what it's symbolic of. So example, a school. A teacher would think of that place as work. A student would think about how he or she feels about school. And an adult, it would be symbolic of a learning experience, whatever we associate with that place. And then again, we all have different experiences with guns. If you're a hunter, it'd be associated with hunting. If you're an NRA member, it could be a symbol of personal rights. If you are a victim of violence, it could be harm or danger. So basically, that's the overview of symbols that we have to keep into account. Now let's look at a real dream. Now I want to point out this dream occurred in 2012 before Donald Trump was president. So we can't impose anything since 2012 on him or on the dream. This was a dream about a husband and a wife's dream about her and her husband. I dreamed that my husband and I were walking and came upon the house of Donald Trump. Everything was gorgeous. Since the doors were open, I suggested we walk inside and tour the mansion. Everything about the home was beautiful and exquisite until we came into the master bedroom. I was shocked to find the room a wreck. Everything was out of place. Towels on the floor, sheets thrown around, etc. Suddenly, I noticed two dogs fighting in the middle of the room, and all at once, one of the dogs squatted and defecated in the bedroom. I didn't know what to think. Now, what's Kevin's first rule? Find the theme. So here's some possible themes. Someone wants to be rich. No, that's, even though they may want to be rich, that's not what the theme is suggesting. Another one, things look better on the outside than they are on the inside. That's a good possible theme. And another one, someone is arguing with someone. And that's another possible theme. So the first step is come up with one or more themes. Those are both good. And then I look at the major symbols. So I'm picking Donald Trump, master bedroom, and two dogs fighting. So if I can figure out what Donald Trump, master bedroom, and two dogs fighting have to do with things look better on the outside than on the inside, I'll get to the heart of this dream. Donald Trump, to the woman, money and success. That's what the dream symbol symbolized. Master bedroom, that's about relationships. It could also be about sex. Two dogs fighting, that's the couple. So in the real world, it appeared they had everything. But in truth, the couple's relationship was in real trouble. They didn't even sleep in the same bedroom anymore. They hardly spoke. Although the kids were off at college and it looked like they had everything, their relationship was really a mess. And in fact, one of the dogs squatting and defecating suggested that one of them kept dropping their crap in the middle of the relationship. And that's what was causing so many problems. So that's really all it is. You just come up with a theme, pick out a few symbols, and go from here. Here's another one. This is a great one because this really ties into figuring out what the person means. This was pre-COVID, so it wasn't during the pandemic. A woman owned a popular restaurant that had employed various family members and others. Here's the dream. I dreamed that George, a waiter who used to work for me, came back and wanted his job back. Although I was open to the idea, George insisted that this time he was going to get a bigger percentage of the tips. I tried to explain that the customers decided what they would tip, but George insisted that he was going to get what he wanted. In the end, I didn't know whether or not to give him his old job back. So the first thing we want to do is come up with a theme. Possible one, someone wants something unreasonable. I mean, it's not reasonable to ask for more tips than the company's actually getting. Someone wants to be in control. Someone is deciding something. Any of those themes will work. Then the next thing we do is we look at the symbols. Now, I can look at any dream dictionary in the whole wide world, and I'm never going to find this George character. So I ask her, what was different about George than anyone you have ever employed? There's a reason her subconscious mind picked this symbol, because this symbol means something to her. So I said, what was different about George than anyone you have ever employed? George had more family problems than anyone I have ever hired. That's what she said. So all at once we know this dream has something to do with what? Family problems. It's not about George. It's about her own family problems. So if we get our symbols, George, family problems. Wants bigger percent of tips, something about money. George insists not sure what to do. This is about confusion. So I asked her, I said, there's something going on in your family that's associated with money and you're not really sure what to do. She said, I'd say, are you having family problems associated with money? That's what I asked. She said, for days I've been arguing with my daughter, one of my best employees, because she wants a percentage of the business rather than the salary she has been getting. That's what the dream's about. Now, see, we did that all from figuring out what George meant. More family problems than anyone I've ever hired. That's why we have to dialogue sometimes with the dreamer. What does that symbol mean to the dreamer? This is one of those, an ARE member, a woman called me. She was sobbing. She was hysterical. She dreamed her daughter had died. I was in the house and got a phone call that Amanda had been killed. The police were calling to tell me about her death. When I heard the news, I screamed and dropped the phone. I ran through the house, calling out to my husband, needing him to help me. I was horrified and sick to my stomach. Theme, something is coming to an end. Something horrible is happening. Something is dying. Any of those work. And then I go through those three symbols. The police is actually a symbol generally for your higher self. Now, if you have had bad experiences with policemen and policemen have been cruel to you or mistreat you, then a policeman is not going to be a symbol of your higher self. But for many people, a policeman can be an authority figure or a symbol of your own higher self. This is about death and change, could be literal, and she wants her husband to help. I asked her, tell me about Amanda, that's her daughter. And she told me Amanda was going away to college. She was going out of state. And she was really scared because she thought the relationship was coming to an end. And her husband did not want to talk about it. Every time she tried to say, well, what are we going to do? Amanda was her only child. What are we going to do? Amanda's gone. He did not want to talk about it. That was his way of dealing with it. That's what the dream is about. This woman is really upset that their whole life is changing. The person she's invested all this love and energy in is going away. And the person she should be able to talk to this through with doesn't want to deal with it. That's his way of dealing with it. That's what the dream is about. So just to briefly tell you, about 900 of Casey's readings deal with dream and dream interpretation. Generally, his wife Gertrude would hold the dream in her hand, wouldn't even read it. She'd say, you'll interpret the dream I have here in my hand. And there asleep on the couch, he'd interpret it. And about 6 times, asleep on the couch, he'll say something like, the dreamer has forgotten a portion of their dream, and he would remind them of a piece of the part of the dream they forgot, and then he'd interpret the whole thing. Now that is truly amazing. His own readings explore about 100 of his own dreams. And Morton Blumenthal has more dream interpretation readings than anyone else. Morton had 340 of his own. But Morton didn't stop there. Morton got dream readings for his brother, his wife, his mother, his sister-in-law, his mother-in-law, his son, secretary. The Blumenthal total is 521 dream readings. And one of my favorite dreams of Morton's is the following. Remember, Morton was in his 20s. He was a very wealthy Jewish stockbroker in New York, very interested in the Casey material. He built the Edgar Casey Hospital, and this is one of his dreams. He's in New York, and there's a knock on his door. And the maid goes and opens the door, and there's a very distinguished elderly businessman there with a briefcase. And the maid turns around and tells Morton, God has come to New York, and he's here for a visit. And Morton is very excited because God has come to him, and he goes to the door and he gives God a big embrace and invites him in, and he decides to give God a tour of his apartment. And as they start to go on the tour, Morton suddenly realizes that in the living room, he's left his liquor cabinet open and all those bottles are showing. And part of him thinks, well, you know what, maybe I'll avoid the living room. And then part of him thinks, well, no, God's not going to care. God's going to love me no matter what. So he goes into the living room, points out the liquor bottles and tells God, this is in case of sickness. And God says, you are very well prepared. And that was the end of the dream. And so Morton fired off that dream to Virginia Beach and said, what's that all about? And Casey said it had 2 meanings. One, that the divine would come to us in the way we could best accept the divine. And in Morton's case, it was a very distinguished looking businessman. And 2, that the divine would accept us in spite of our frailties. And that was what the dream was all about. So here's one of Edgar Casey's dreams, just to show you one of the 100 he had. He had been worried about his personal finances for a long, long time. And in the dream, he has this dream where he's with the Duke and Duchess of Windsor, and he's with Jesus. And they're walking along the Champs-Élysées in Paris. And the Champs-Élysées is one of the most expensive shopping districts in the world. And as they're all walking along, Casey notices a sidewalk cafe. And he suggests they should all sit down and have a drink together, drink the champagne. He says, after all, we're here in Paris. So they all sit down, the four of them, and they have a nice glass of champagne and a nice conversation. And after they finish their champagne, the Duke and Duchess get up and leave. And Casey's sitting there with Jesus. And all at once, Casey realizes he essentially invited everyone for champagne. And he feels inside his pocket and he doesn't have any money. And all at once, I guess he feels too embarrassed to ask Jesus about borrowing some money. So he just sits there for a minute, really, really nervous. And all at once, Jesus starts to laugh and says, Casey, am I going to have to send you out for a fish too? And that was the end of the dream. Now, royalty and wealth would be the Duke and Duchess of Windsor. They traveled the world. The Champs-Élysées, I already told you, it's about an expensive place. So this is something to do with Casey's finances. This is all about money and wealth. And this has something to do with spirituality and faith. And in the dream, Jesus says, am I going to have to send you out for a fish too? Well, Casey was very familiar with the story in Matthew, which is when the apostles go into Capernaum and they have to pay a tax to get into the city and they don't have any money. So Jesus sends a couple of them to catch a fish, and the first fish they catch has a coin stuck in its mouth, the amount they need to pay the tax. So the dream was simply telling Mr. Casey to have the faith, and whatever he needed would be provided. That's what the dream was about. Here's what Casey said. As we see, all visions and dreams are given for the benefit of the individual, would they but interpret them correctly. And happy may he be that is able to say they've been spoken to through a dream or vision. Dreams are really about personal guidance. And just to give you a few examples of how personal guidance had worked, there's Harriet Tubman. She used to have dreams that would help her go through the Underground Railroad. She used to have these fits of narcolepsy where she'd fall asleep, and she'd often have a dream that would give them insights into where they should go next. Elias Howe invented the sewing machine because of a dream. He was trying to create the automatic sewing machine. It was not electric, it was with a foot pump. Apparently had some investors, have been trying to do this for a while. Anyone who knows about a needle and thread notices that the hole is at the fat end of the needle. And he had tried to make that automatic several times. The needle kept breaking. Finally, he had a dream. And in the dream, he's in a stew pot being boiled alive in Africa. I guess that symbolized the tension and stress he was under. And instead of being panicking, he looked around and noticed that all the natives standing around him had a spear. And the spear had a sharp point at the end of it. And at the end of the sharp point was where there was a hole. So when he woke up, he moved the hole from the thick end of the needle to the thin end of the needle. And that's how we got the automatic sewing machine. And if any of you ever hated physics, this guy came up with a periodic table in a dream. This is how he described it. I saw in a dream a table where all the elements fell into place as required. Awakening, I immediately wrote it down on a piece of paper. Only in one place did a correction later seem necessary. So a periodic table led to a dream. I did a program here in Virginia Beach for a woman's group. And there was a young woman, maybe in her 20s, who had a dream that she thought was telling her not to have children. And she was really afraid because she wanted children. Here's her dream. I dreamed that my husband and I had a baby. We got the baby all dressed up to go to a party, even though the baby didn't want to go and cried about the whole time. When we got there, the baby was in the corner just sulking, and I knew that the baby wanted to leave. In frustration, my husband and I took the baby home. Well, what's the theme here? Someone is being a baby or throwing a tantrum. This couple doesn't have a baby. So my only choices are this woman or her husband. And in the dream, they're going to a party. So I asked the woman, how does your husband feel about family parties? She said, he hates them. I have to drag him to get to go. And when we go, he just doesn't have a good time at all. The dream was about her husband was being a baby. He was the one throwing the tantrum. One more, and then I'll use some samples here that were sent in ahead of time. Man had a dream. Previously had his Rolex stolen. He's extremely busy at work and doesn't often see his family. So here's the dream. I dreamed that I was looking at my Rolex. Suddenly I realized that it was a fake and that had been replaced by a cheap copy. I ran to a police officer to tell him that someone had stolen my watch. However, the police officer told me that I was wrong and that my watch was still there. I looked at my wrist and saw that he was right. So the dream is something valuable is not really gone. His Rolex is what's valuable. We know we have quality time. And so he's basically saying that his time is being taken from him. He's blaming his job, in other words. And his higher self tells him that he still has control over the time. That's what it's all about. Let me go ahead to one here. I want you to see this. I'm going to skip to this one. I think the next one. The next one. I have lots of these, so I just want to show you about dreaming about the future. Not that one. I've done this for 40 years. Here's what I want you to see, and then we'll stop. A man had to make a decision between a full-time job and starting his own business, and so he had a dream. He dreamed he saw his front window, out the front window. And out on the front window, he saw a little girl sitting on his grass. And all at once, he saw an office supply van pull up. And two men got out of the office supply van and took the little girl and kidnapped her and took her away. And that was the end of the dream. Now remember, he's trying to decide between starting a full-time job he's been offering or starting his own business. And this is what the symbolism is trying to tell him. Something is kidnapped or something's taken away. That's the theme. When you look out the front window, it's seeing your future. So that if you look out the back window, it's usually about the past or something behind you or something hidden from public view. The office supply truck is the full-time job that he's been offered. And this is his startup business that he's looking out the window seeing, the possibility of a new beginning that he's created. The dream is telling him that if he takes the full-time job, he will never have the business. That's what the dream's about. So all I want you to know is that dreams give us insights into everything going on in our life if we just look for them. Now I'll give you a couple things people have sent in and then we'll let Joy ask me any other questions. Here's one. Very common dream symbols. That's why I picked this one. I can't find my car in the parking garage. Anytime we dream about can't find our car, it's about our life's direction. So you go out in the parking lot, you can't find it, it's somewhere you can't. The person doesn't know what they're supposed to be doing right now in their life. They can't find their car. What am I supposed to be doing? What is my purpose in life? Where am I supposed to be going? Those are all the reasons that kind of a dream would occur. Next one. This person has a house with many rooms they've never seen before, lots of different rooms. It suggests untapped portions of our personality, our talents, our abilities, things that we could do that we just haven't even looked into yet. Another one. I'm in a room with a man, a boss, a friend. He looks like a previous boss of mine. So if the person was over here, I would say, describe your boss to me. I show him that I'm able to defy gravity and demonstrate how I levitate. I'm floating up to the top of the ceiling of the room. I tell him I had a dream that I could do it, and I've recorded in my dream journal. This person's dream is essentially stating that they're able to rise above any kind of obstacle, often at work. They can rise above it, probably in their thoughts. The things that are going on at work generally don't bother them like other people. And one more, this person had lots of dreams about horses, all kinds of dreams about horses. And then they go on to say, this is their note here. I had horses as a child between the ages of 11 and 13. I was severely injured by a horse, kicking me in the right lower leg, breaking bones, and putting me in a cast for a very long time. I had 3 years of struggling to walk. I recovered and went on a dance, partake in athletics, even run marathons. So now anytime she's having a dream, this is a memory pattern dream, which I'll explain in just a minute. It's a dream about overcoming obstacles. So anytime in life she's had an obstacle that she's overcome, something worked out great, she's gotten past it, she may dream about a horse because the horse is symbolic of overcoming an obstacle. So a memory pattern works like this. All of us have had dreams probably where we go back to school, we're in an English class or some kind of class, and the teacher's going to pass out a test that day and we didn't know there'd be a test. That is a memory pattern of not feeling prepared for something. Now that doesn't mean we still have unresolved issues from high school. It means that something's going on in our life right now, we don't feel prepared, so our soul mind looks for a period in our soul's past when we didn't feel prepared and we have that dream. That is the reason we have past life dreams. Something's going on in our present, and our soul mind looks for a period in the past that will bring the same thing to our awareness again. And we may dream about a past relationship. or we may dream about a past experience or occupation to bring to our awareness that the same thing is happening again. So what that means, short answer here, if you dream about an ex-spouse, it probably is about your current spouse. If you dream about an ex-boss, it's probably about your current spouse. If you dream about someone you used to have communication problems with, it's about someone you're currently having communication problems with. Dreams contrast and correlate the events of the day right now. Okay, Joy, ready for any other questions? You're on mute.
Okay, Kevin, thank you so much. This is
You're welcome.
Just amazing. And I love the way you were able to take these dreams that people have sent in and really get to the heart of them. I wanted to ask about what about dreaming of someone who might be deceased? Or say wanting to contact someone who's deceased, but you don't have their phone number or don't know how to get in touch with them?
Well, the dreaming of deceased people can be lots of different things, but let's say that you want, let's say first of all, you would like to communicate with someone who is deceased. So what I recommend is writing out the question, how is so-and-so doing? So a story I remember is there was a woman who, whose minister told her to call ARE. Her young child had been like 3 or 4 out on the street, had been hit by a car, turning the corner too quickly, killed. She was distraught. Her name was Stacy. She called ARE. I asked her to write out the question, how's Stacy? Dream on it, see what happened. In the dream, she went to the cemetery, and Stacy is sitting there on her gravesite with a birthday cake and a candle, and the candle's lit. And she looks up and she says, don't worry, mommy, I'm okay. I'm okay. I'm okay. And the woman starts to cry and she says, but she's not okay. She's dead. I said, no, she's very much alive. She's just not physical. So we can have real communication with dream in the dream state. If you dream about not being able to communicate with someone who's deceased, it could be about communication problems with that person that need to be healed, or it could be about communication problems with other people in the present that need to be healed.
Okay, great. What if someone has really deep, even violent dreams that wake them up and that are extremely disturbing? And it might be, you know, different people chasing you or, you know, something that nature, but they're just so disturbing that they're almost traumatic.
So because it's like general themes, let me respond in general. In general, if you're running from something, what are you trying to avoid in waking life? So is there somebody you need to confront about something going on and you keep trying to avoid it? That could be what the dream's about. Is there something you don't want to deal with and that not dealing with it is making you very anxious over and over and over again? What is it that you're avoiding in waking life that your subconscious is trying to get you to face? Okay, that's what I would say.
Okay. And there was a dream submitted about a person who's planning a couple of vacation trips and arranged to meet with some people who had been to these destinations to be better prepared. Her boss was there. They met in the boss's office. And while they were there, the boss informed her that another juvenile facility was closing. So she walked down the hall, emptied the trash, decided she'd return the trash to its usual place and remove it for good when the area closed. The guys who worked there had thrown trash in the can in the same location for many years. And she marveled at how quickly, after hearing the closure, it was going to actually happen.
So, I mean, it could be 2 separate dreams that are not necessarily connected. And if they're all connected, it's suggesting that whatever she's planning to do, whether it's a vacation or whatever plan, is going to be changed rather abruptly because her work plans are not going to pan out the way they usually do. Something's going to change much more quickly. That's the thing. Something's going to change much more quickly than she's imagining.
Mm-hmm. Okay. What about dreaming of being with people who have died? Let's say, this is kind of a variation on the other dream we were talking about, of say being in a group with family and some of them have passed away, but they seem alive and well. And one of the family members actually has a dog that needs to be taken care of. And the dreamer finds a place in this kind of mall, this restaurant where everyone's getting together for this gathering at a FedEx place to keep the dog for a while. Meanwhile, the children in the family are performing, and it's a very, very happy thing. And then the dreamer remembers, well, wait a minute, I've got to get that dog, and rushes back and thinks the dog is lost, but eventually finds it.
Well, again, there's lots going on there. But let me talk about deceased first. When my grandfather died, we used to spend every Thanksgiving in Utah, and we'd have Thanksgiving with them. My family, my mother's brother's family, my grandparents. And that was a tradition over and over again. My grandfather died. That first year I had a dream about him. And the dream was we were all together for Thanksgiving, the whole family, except for my grandfather. We're all around the Thanksgiving table. And I look into the kitchen, and my grandfather's sitting there all by himself. So I go into the kitchen and I sat down, and my grandfather told me he was dead and that he was fine and everything was great. And he thanked me for being his grandson. And he just wanted to reassure me that everything was okay. So lots of times people can come to us in dreams to reassure us they're still okay. Well, I had that dream over and over and over and over and over. And finally, after about the 6th or 7th time, I asked myself, why do I keep having this dream? I'm not having any unresolved issues with my grandfather. And then I realized my grandfather was trying to communicate that whole experience to everyone around that dining table. But I was the only one watching my dreams. And that's why I was having that experience. So the one side, we can have communication with real loved ones in the dream state. In terms of the dream you told me about the dog, to me, the dog is either literally symbolic of something that the deceased person cared for, something or someone that needs to be taken care of. The fact that they're caught up in this FedEx office suggests that whatever went on after this person's death is about lots of speedy communication. Things are happening too fast. FedEx is speedy communication. So there's so much going on that the dreamer has probably forgotten about some of the things that were truly important to the deceased, and that's what they need to be refocusing on. What's truly important to the deceased, rather than all the logistics of what do we do now that this person has died. That's what I would say.
Okay, great. Just one more, and it involves dreaming about the ability to teleport or levitate oneself and communicating that to other people and kind of showing that, yes, I can really do this. I can really do this kind of levitation.
I think anything to do with levitation, which is really about rising above the situation, rising above the current situation, and any kind of telekinesis communication is really about either having a more intellectual way of communicating, because it's coming from your mind, or having a higher level of communication. So whatever this person's involved in, at least the dreamer thinks that they have a better way of understanding or having insights into or looking into the situation more so than some of the other people involved in the situation.
Okay. Well, that's wonderful. We had went through a number of dreams that people have shared. I want to thank everybody for sharing them. If anybody has any questions, you want to send it through to us, we can try to answer them after the program, or you can send it through the chat feature. But we are at the end of our program today. Kevin, is there anything else you would like to share with us before we do our close?
I would just encourage people to work with their dreams. What I often do is write out a question: what is the energy surrounding this situation? Someone could write a question like, what can you tell me about my relationship with so-and-so? What can you tell me about my job? You can read it. If you want more insights from my dream books, you go to kevintedeschi.com and they'll all come up. And I encourage you to get ARE's edgarcayce.org/apps dream app, because it can be very helpful. Okay.
Thank you. And we use your book in our dream interpretation discussion with study groups. I think we're going to have to get the app as well.
All right. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, Joy.
Thank you.
All right,
Thank you, Kevin. And we'll just close with some resources here that we can share. There you go. If you want to take a quick look at this, everyone who's attending, some information. We do a Southern California newsletter. If you want to subscribe, if you're not getting it, you can write me at joy@scottpublicrelations.com. Contacts here for study groups. We also have a Facebook page here in Southern California, meetup groups in Southern California, a website with information, and a California website. And finally, I want to mention our next program, which is going to be on August 29th, Sunday, with Joanne DiMaggio, who is an author and a longtime student of the Casey Readings, who has written a book on how to do soul writing, conversing with your higher self. This is something that's of interest to me, being finding writing to be very inspirational, and to learn how to do it to access our higher self, the Akashic Records, is something that we're really looking forward to. Well, thank you very much. We have recorded tonight's session. We will post it within the next couple of days, so you can rewatch it, or if someone who registered couldn't attend, you can see it. Thank you so very, very much, and have a great evening. God bless. Sweet dreams.